Alright, there we go. Alright, so
We're live.
yeah, we are live. Let me go ahead and flip things over. Okay, I want to make this abundantly clear, Arrow. This is just straight up, just off the cuff. Like we kind of just, we kind of were just shooting the shit about this and just being like, oh, it'd be funny, like, because we talked about the campaign a lot, and then it was just like, it'd be funny, like, let's like let's actually have like a thing of like, oh, what do you think of like Strahd from like a therapist perspective? And then we kind of had little talks about that, and then it just eventually devolved into like, what's genuinely like
Let's sit down and have this conversation because for those who don't know, I am kind of almost a therapist. I'm a student therapist right now. I'm doing my master's in counseling psychology and I'm halfway done my placement. So in about 4 months, I'll be an actual therapist. So this is something that we've just talked about to kind of get a therapist perspective on Strahd and everything that's going on with him. Because Khan did ask me at one point, and I gave a very brief summary, but we're kind of just yeah, let's actually sit down and have a chat about this and talk about everybody's favorite vampire incel lord.
yeah. Um, I it should obviously be a given that this is all like this is a mix. This is going to be heavily spoiling a lot of the themes of Curse of Strahd. So this is going to give away basically the main story beat and everything. Which, I mean, if you're playing a module that has the name of the BEEG on it, probably everything that is going on is going to be tied to him. So we're going to. So this is the only warning anyone's getting, is the fact that this will spoil the entire campaign. So I know we haven't played. I know I haven't run it in a while, Arrow, because of mixing time schedules. But be warned, this will spoil the campaign. I know, but it's something that I figured to do too. Now that since Ray has also kind of finished Curse of Strahd, because we did complete through the whole module, so she obviously there were some things that she hasn't explored, and that's kind of what I'm here to kind of also help clarify on, because there's some aspects of Strahd's lore that the party didn't get to due to the time crunch of the events going on, and that's not on them. That's just the pacing of the game that I had set up. So
Yeah, because you had said at one point that things are going to start happening whether we're ready or not, and it kind of just we didn't get enough time to dive into the Tome of Strahd
yeah,
further.
yeah, and plus the player that possessed it wasn't here 75%
Mm-hmm.
of the time, so that also didn't help in terms of looking into the tome,
Yeah.
which again, something to clarify on that too is the tome that I used is modified, because the
Mm-hmm.
tome for the base module of Curse of Strahd is literally they give you a paragraph or two to read, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the same thing with a couple of other things, but basically to kind of give a general idea of some of the modifications I made with the story of Curse of Strahd, just so to kind of give a preference on Ray's going off the information she is given, which some of the information is tweaked and modified, because my version of Strahd is going to be different than another person's version of Strahd. Strahd, that is kind of the beauty with villains, especially villains in D&D, is they have a set mindset you want to have with them, but depending on what angle or what themes you're trying to present with that character, you can kind of twist and bend the story. The thing with Strahd that makes Strahd a very notable and well-known villain throughout the history of D&D is not only is Strahd basically kind of a breakaway from the genre when D&D first started, because Ravenloft, the setting, was the first non-fantasy setting that was created in D&D's history. So Strahd was the first kind of villain that wasn't your traditional weird wizard or dragon. Like, the creators, I forget their name for the life of me, and I'm gonna, like, I forget the name for the life of me, and it's going to, and I know someone's gonna bitch at me for that. They basically wanted to take AD&D at the time and make it into a different genre, and that was kind of the testing grounds for it, was Ravenloft, and that's how we got Strahd, the Mist, Vistani, and so on and so forth. And so, like, over the years, Ravenloft eventually evolved into the setting, and then that's when we got Curse of Strahd, and obviously, because of that, we've gotten a lot more information about Strahd, and obviously his story has changed a lot. And obviously the big theme I was pushing with this version of Curse of Strahd was breaking the cycle. Because the cycle of Barovia, the cycle of Ravenloft, was perpetually stuck in the cycle of just getting close to that light at the end of the tunnel and then just getting pulled right back. Which we obviously can make the distinct argument that the cycle was not broken. It just has taken a new form.
It's taken a interesting form.
Indeed.
That's right.
It very much has, but
It really has.
I think a good way to kind of start off with things too is, before like I go into like the really big deep story with Strahd, like obviously I will cover a lot of the stuff that you know and I like that you've learned. I would say let's start off with straight up just like based off your interactions with him as Ophelia and Ed, or like experiencing the campaign from your perspective, like from the information that has been gathered by the party and yourself. What is your initial kind of feelings towards Strahd? Like what, like I guess a good way we could treat this as if Strahd von Zarovich was in your was taking therapy from you.
Yeah, oh boy. So, I think one of the biggest things that comes up for me is the idea of control. So basically what I mean by that is Strahd is someone who, if he was to come and sit down and be like, you know, therapy and that kind of stuff, one of the themes that would come up was control. Because he controls everything within Ravenloft and Barovia. He controls the mist, he controls, you know, the wolves, he controls all this kind of stuff. And in the sense, he kind of controls, like, his own destiny and the fact that he is stuck in this cycle. And kind of in that theme of control is a bit of what I would say perfectionism coming from him, too. Just for the fact that, like, one of the things is he wants to leave, he wants to end this thing, but he doesn't think anybody's good enough to replace him. So there's a bit of like, he wants it to be perfect, a little bit of like narcissism, thinking that he's like the end all be all type thing. And the fact that he sees a lot of things as a game. You know, so he's someone who, he doesn't take things very, like a lot of stuff he doesn't take very seriously because he just views it as a game. Like people dying, he's like, eh. You know, like, slight spoiler, but the siege on Vallaki, that was a game to him. And he didn't really care what happened to the town. He was kind of just like, I'm done with this, let's just restart type thing. And like, he also secretly, I think, even though his parents are no longer there, I still think he was trying to vie for their approval. More so his dad than his mom. Because his dad put all this pressure and everything on him, so I think there was still the underlying, I need to prove myself to my dad specifically.
Okay. So yeah, I will kind of jump in on that too, because it's a case of like, it's very kind of, yeah, because that is kind of an underlining theme with Strahd. Like, a lot of the information, especially that I pulled my version of Strahd from, is from the older books written about Strahd's life, called I Strahd. Like, it's an older book. It's very dated. Like, there's obviously some things that, like, you wrote that shit today, people are gonna be like, eh. But I Strahd, I think, is a good book series that if you want the ideas and kind of the minds, because for the most part, it covers basically what he was like when he was alive, what his transformation into, in the early days, basically, of being a vampire, like what he, because again, like, the transition to the Dark Lord he becomes now wasn't like as soon as he died he became like this egotistical asshole. Like, that's just something that happens with time, because that is an element of D&D. Like, you gain, like, eternal life that mortals shouldn't have. They tend to lose their sense of self, or a particular personality trait comes out the most. That's why, for instance, like, liches, like Vecna, a Serac, and stuff like that, like, they are, like, powerful, smart beings, but then eventually they just devolve into this kind of almost like, I need to consume everything or else I lose myself. And that's kind of the general theme with, I know that's like liches, but vampires are kind of the same general thing. Yeah, like, I'm not saying he was a great man. Like, Strahd was, like, pretty tyrannical.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing, is it's one of these things where the way that we kind of describe it in therapy is, and I've described this to my clients myself, is it's all about how you approach and handle a situation. So you can take two separate people who go through the same thing, and if one has what we call resilience factors, which are like a good support system, healthy coping mechanisms, they're going to come out on the side a lot better than someone who doesn't have great resilience factors. And that would be like maladaptive coping skills and more harmful behavior. So kind of with like Strahd and everything, the fear of not wanting to lose it, and same with like Vecna and Serac and any other type of evil entity within D&D, there's a fear of losing that and not being what they think they should be.
Because again, like, when you're a being as old and ancient as Strahd, or some of the other beings that live a long time that by no reason should, but they do, it does eventually become to a point where, like, I guess there is that hubris, that arrogance of just like, I've been alive this long, I'm clearly smarter than everyone else type situation, and that can lead to a very, that's how, like, because again, like, by all rights, if Strahd, like, wasn't sure, like, he was going to win, because I imagine the first couple of times he's pulled people into the Mist of Ravenloft, if they pose a legitimate threat, he didn't hold back, he just ruined them.
Yeah.
But it's just over that time of just, there's nothing to do, I'm bored, I'm just doing this to entertain myself, that's when he started pulling a lot. That's why he pulls more of that level of arrogance that just comes with, naturally, with becoming a vampire, did get to him. And I think that's something that is not only just ingrained into a being like Strahd himself, but that's just an inherent flaw that comes with a being that shouldn't be living as long as he does.
Yeah, and like you said, over time he's kind of realized that nobody is, in his mind anyways, nobody can live up to himself. Like, nobody is powerful enough, nobody is strong enough, nobody's cunning enough to kind of deal with him. So he thinks he can keep getting away with this, and he has gotten away with it, which is why it's a cycle. It's kind of like, you know, the cycles within like a family that you want to break or something, or a maladaptive pattern that you want to break. And a lot of people stay in that thing because it's comfortable, they understand. Whereas if they tried to break out of it, it's like new territory, it's uncomfortable. They may not feel okay about it in the first place. So that's kind of the same thing with Strahd, where he's just stuck in this cycle, despite the fact that I think he does want to leave eventually, but he's like, nobody's good enough to like live up to the expectations that I've set on myself.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I
So,
like your little Strahd slideshow.
thank you. I figured to have a little something on there, so I just have little like images flashing every so often. I'm trying to find a good pace of it so it's not just like flicking through them too damn quickly.
It's
Um,
just like Strahd, 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 Strahd in your face.
well, basically, yeah. I was just trying to find different artwork depictions of him because it's I try to go for like more official sources, so it's not like there are some very good fan art of them, but I think using like the official artwork to kind of give you an idea of like who he, like how he's
Hmm.
depicted like canonically. Everyone has their own depictions of him, obviously, like
Yeah.
we established. So I think the next point of this is going over kind of his life story and kind of because you know most of the tale at this point now of
Hmm.
who he is, and obviously like obviously we've kind of established that he had he didn't have the best upbringing, and this
No.
I think this also kind of goes back to like to me this kind of goes to the ideal of like the whole he didn't have a good upbringing in terms of like what would be healthy, and obviously whether it's
Hmm.
through the fates or just the mixture of his own choices or something prodding him along led to the decisions and choices that ended up making him, because honestly in the situation he was in, like some of there were I think I think the term is flashpoints in his life that
Hmm.
like by all rights he should have died.
Yeah.
He should like he would have not been a problem, but something or someone intervened and helped him get to the point where he was at.
Hmm.
And that's and I think that's something that's very telling, especially because we could be sitting here talking about his brother Sergei. We could be talking about like in because
Oh
there are
yeah.
alternate universes where it's not Strahd on the throne, it's Sergei or Tatiana or
Hmm.
one of the brides that Strahd ends up picking up. It's
Hmm.
like, but it also I think goes down to the idea of like his arrogance and his ego is because he's survived a lot, and the
Yeah.
fact that either the fates or a god or in this case the dark gods had something planned for him,
Hmm.
which is an aspect I think that doesn't get talked a lot about in D&D and how it's very different than like IRL because you know IRL we don't know if there are beings that influence the world or if this is just literally happen chance and whatnot. But in
Yeah.
D&D, there is absolute certainty. There are beings higher up that influence like events. And
Hmm.
based off the story of Strahd, it's to me at least, there's a lot more happenstances of like he got way too lucky.
Hmm.
And I think a part of that did play into his psychology a bit, where it's just like stuff happened to him and either it was because of the right time or the right events, or there might have
Hmm.
been something behind the scenes that was guiding him to becoming quintessentially, by all rights, the first vampire,
Hmm.
becoming the lord of the land, and creating and kickstarting what is Ravenloft.
Yeah. And that's the thing. If you have kind of if you escape death or you have like a bunch of near misses and stuff, some depending on your personality and everything, you are going to start thinking that, oh, maybe I'm like a chosen person, or maybe I'm like, you know, favored in some sense. Like there are people that think they're favored by the gods and everything, and they kind of have this like god complex and everything. So, um, it's interesting with him, because if we kind of look at when we first went into the tome and we had that introduction chapter of him as a child, I felt bad. Like, I really did. I felt bad for Kid Strahd because he was like just an innocent child and he wanted to like, do his own thing. He was worried about being a good big brother and that kind of stuff, but like his dad was more set on training him to be like him. And he was like, "No, he's not going to be soft." I don't know if that was the exact word that was
Yeah.
used, but basically he was like, "I don't want him to be soft. Like he needs to be hard. He needs to be like, you know, able to deal with stuff and everything like that."
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, like I did feel bad. I did feel bad for Kid Strahd. I really did.
Yeah.
Because he was an innocent child.
Yeah, because that's something to consider, especially with a villain like Strahd. Is like at one point like that's no justification for what he does later on in his life, but at one point, yeah, there's again one of those flashpoints where like from the way the stories are written about Strahd, he was just pretty much like an average human. Like if he didn't grow up in the family he grew up in with the parents that he had, like I'm not gonna fault his mom at all. Like his mom like clearly between the two, because canonically Strahd and Sergei both were very fond of their mother. Like that was someone that like clearly was some sort of support for him, because I guarantee you between the father and the mother, like she was both of their emotional supports.
So, kind of in that same sense, you can kind of see the attachment styles that they had with their parents. Because Strahd's mom was the like supportive attachment and everything, and she was very like, I would imagine she was very hands-on. Like if they fell or something, she would come there and kind of comfort them and that kind of stuff. Whereas his dad was very distant in his attachment. I don't have the exact terminology for the different attachment styles with caregivers, but like his dad was very distant. He was focused on like prepping things for, like Arrow said, prepping for conflicts and making sure that he was ready to like when he takes over, because it was obvious being the firstborn in that type of family setting, firstborn male most likely is going to take over once the father passed. So he wants to make sure that Strahd is prepared, but in the sense he's not being an actual father figure. He's more of like a teacher,
Right.
as opposed to like a parent.
And I think that's also too where Rahadin also comes in, because
Mm-hmm.
like when you are the head of the family like that and you are trying to prepare an heir like that to take over and become basically kind of a miniature version of you, or at least that's the hope, is either to be someone like you or someone better than you need someone there that is there for the more practical stuff that you may not be able to teach. So Rahadin, like for as long as he stayed alive, was there for Strahd from when he was, because Rahadin had also been part of the von Zarovich family for long time, because he's a long living elf, and
Yeah.
definitely,
And like Rahadin kind of stepped into that parental figure for Strahd, if you think about it, because he was the one who did a lot of the studies with him. He did a lot of the teachings and all that kind of stuff. Whereas like his dad was busy with everything else. So Rahadin, no, we don't call him Daddy Rahadin. Don't you dare say that, Arrow. Not in my therapist chair. We don't say that. But he kind of stepped into like that paternal role. And yeah, like a Pennyworth, exactly.
yeah, like he would if Strahd was Batman in a literal and figurative sense, Rahadin was his Alfred.
Technically, he is a Batman if you want to.
Yeah, no,
Like
that's why I say figuratively and possibly quite literally.
Yeah. But that's the thing. So Rahadin took a lot of like the upbringing and stuff that Strahd's dad, Barov, I think his name is. I have.
Hold on, I have the name.
Yeah, I have the module pulled up on D&D Beyond. I think it's Barov. But yeah, like he, kind of took in. He did a lot of that, and in those like well affluent families, that's kind of the norm, anyways. Is you have like a tutor or a page or someone like that that does a lot of that kind of stuff with the kids as they grow up. They do the teachings, they do the readings, and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that to me is one of the reasons that makes Strahd fascinating, because what if he didn't live up to that expectation? Because that's a divergent point right there. What if he didn't? Because again, like, it seemed from, at least from what I've read from Strahd and some of the other context clues that a lot of people use, because it seems like a lot of DMs that I've seen interact with base a lot of their Strahd on the book Strahd.
Mm-hmm.
And the vibe I get is from the Von, because that's not just a tradition in the Von Zarovich family, but wherever they come from, is the fact that the firstborn always becomes the warrior, the conqueror, the fighter.
Yeah.
And then the other one gets sent to the Church of the Morning Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that what if divergence of what if that was swap? What if Sergei was born first? And what if Sergei became the warrior and Strahd was the one that was the cleric, the one that grew up in the church? Because that was a big point. That's a big point with Strahd that kind of eventually leads to the dark road he leads, is the fact that, like, Strahd had to go and fight all these nasty battles. Like, Strahd wasn't someone that was, like, always sitting in the back line, directing orders like most generals. Strahd was in the trenches, basically. He was there fighting and killing and having to harden himself to become the warrior and the conqueror that he did eventually become, like his father. His life, after a certain point, was only war. He didn't have time for luxuries. He didn't have time to make interpersonal relationships outside of, like, his crew, like his officers, the people in charge of his troops and everything. There's very few people, recorded at least, that Strahd actively got along with. Because if they weren't people that served him or served underneath him, he didn't really have a relationship. Like, he didn't have any lovers. He wasn't the kind of person that was going around to brothels and paying money for that shit, because he was a general, he was a leader, he needed to uphold himself to a standard.
Yeah.
And
I think that was a bone of contention between him and Sergei, because Sergei did get more, if I remember reading when I've done my own research on this, Sergei got more of his mom's attention.
Absolutely.
Because he was like I hate using the word soft, but he was like the soft boy, and Strahd was jealous of him because he was like not pushed into being the general, being a fighter and everything like that.
And I think that also kind of is a case of, like, siblings, where it's like, if you have a younger sibling, like, they tend to get a little bit more babied on than, like, the older sibling, because, like, for lack of a better term, and I'm not trying to be rude about it or anything, but, like, when you're the firstborn, you're basically the first draft of how to raise your kid. Like,
I've been called the first draft by my parents, so yep.
Yeah. Yeah, like, obviously for lack of better term. So yeah, it's like, you could clearly tell, like, there is a level of divergence when it comes to, like, younger siblings, where it's like, because I guarantee you the reason, because I guarantee you that is part of the the reason Sergei was seen a lot softer, because I imagine since Baroff had his ideal son in Strahd, his mother could have her own, in a sense, her own child. Like, for lack of a better term, like, obviously I'm not saying, like, there was, like, favoritism or parentification, but there was clearly a favor, whether they meant to or not. Like you said, like, Strahd's mother clearly favored Sergei, because Sergei was the softer of the two sons. But that's also because, probably, again, Baroff did not force his ideals down Sergei's throat. He probably, like, to be honest, and this is just speculation, that I guarantee you, like, he barely paid attention to Sergei. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Baroff focused most of his attention to grooming and raising Strahd to become the warrior. He probably acknowledged Sergei's existence, but probably left a lot of the raising to his mother, which is in why in my brain I think his mother was the softer one of the two. Like, I know that's the whole like parental dynamic, but I genuinely believe that she was a good woman at heart, because a lot more of herself was reflected in Sergei because she had the chance to raise him. And if she had the opportunity and the privilege to raising Strahd, I feel like Strahd could have ended up like Sergei too. But that would have also been detrimental in the field of war, because if you have a soft heart, that will get you killed.
Yeah. So if we kind of want to look at what... So one of the leading therapists, his name's Alfred Adler, he did a study about like birth order and kind of some characteristics that go along with this, in a sense. So kind of like with the firstborn, so like Strahd as a firstborn, he might be like feelings of superiority, difficulty when the second child is born, like feeling unloved or neglected, what kind of lines up because he felt like he wasn't getting his mom's attention. You know, a tendency to be bossy or authoritarian about rules, that seems very like generally kind of that kind of stuff and everything. Whereas if we look at Sergei, who's the baby of the family, like, you know, he kind of charming and outgoing, might be a bit of an attention seeker. You know, he might expect others to make decisions and take responsibility for him. And the other thing is, like, he might not be taken seriously. And I think there's a decent age gap between Strahd and Sergei as well, isn't there? There's like 12 years, I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a lot of like, and again, because again, like, and that's part of the resentment I think with Strahd and Sergei too, is because again, Strahd was in the trenches, he was fighting people, taking over land like hell. Like in his story, him and his army literally fought Argynvost, a adult silver dragon, which I like. If it wasn't for a being like Strahd, who was an exceptional general and fighter, dragons are no joke. Like, I know it's easy for like the players, like us being the people that make these characters, to kill like powerful beings and stuff like that. Obviously that's the intent of the story, but it's like you're talking about the average man fighting a fucking dragon, and not only that, a dragon backed by an order of well-trained knights that easily could have outclassed any general soldier. And Strahd had to deal with all that and all the other stuff, and in his eyes, when he looked over at Sergei, like, I'm sure Sergei definitely had his struggles, because, again, religious practice, especially becoming a preacher like he did, is not easy. That's a lot of studying. That's a lot of, like, remembering doctrines. I'm sure Sergei had to give up a lot of personal freedoms to becoming a priest of the Morning Lord.
Yeah.
But Strahd doesn't see that, because Sergei never had to wield a weapon with the intent to kill a man. Like, I'm sure Sergei has gotten into fights, but he's never had to go with the intent to kill. So for lack of a better phrase, like, Sergei's hands are soft while Strahd's were hardened. Because you can always tell the difference between someone that has never seen conflict and a person that has, based off mannerisms, especially in those times, your hands.
Yeah.
Like hard work and hard times, like, your hands are going to be tougher, there's more calluses, there's more like difficulties. Sergei didn't really have that. Like, academically, yeah, he probably struggled a lot more than like Strahd did, but
definitely.
But at the end of the day, Sergei was a holy boy. He didn't have to fight, he didn't have to kill, he just had to convert.
Yeah, he was just a holy man who said, "Come follow my God, he great."
Yeah.
Pretty much.
And
But
go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and I think that's what, and to me, that is what leads to kind of like the first step in one of the first steps that led Strahd down the dark path of making the pact, which is when he conquered Barovia, he built that castle because the castle was named after his mom, Castle Ravenloft, and and as a sign of appreciation, he wanted her to come and see the castle, see what he has done for her, what he has done for the von Zarovich family line, and on the way there, she dies.
Yeah.
She's killed. We're not sure officially who did it or why it happened, but she dies. And a part of that is Sergei coming out to show, basically to be like, to show appreciation towards Strahd, but also as a way to kind of mourn the loss of their mother. Which I've heard some plenty of crackpot theories about like what happened to his mom, and one of them I weirdly kind of agree with, which would be interesting, and I would kind of want your input on this. If you think it would be within the psyche of Strahd. One of the leading theories is the people that killed his mom were sent by Strahd. Like, Strahd killed his own mother, but made it look like it was a freak accident or whatever. Like, maybe it was a mixture of not getting enough attention from his mom or the fact that she doted on Sergei. Maybe that was the first kind of lashing out of him trying to get back at Sergei, was to kill his mother. Like, I feel like that's a roundabout way, but I feel like in a sense that would fit within kind of Strahd's MO of just, that starts the pattern of going after, because again, that was another thing with Strahd, is like the Strahd tactics that he used on, like, would use on people later on would be like, if I can't hurt you personally, I go after the things you love or the things of attachment to you. So I'm wondering if maybe that was like, again, that's a theory, that's not official, but like, do you think that would be within the realm of possibility of someone like Strahd performing something like that, like killing a family member to get back at someone else in his life, like his brother Sergei?
That's an interesting theory. And I think it's not that's not the word, impossible. I think it's not impossible. I think it could be something that he would do, and I think maybe the motivation behind it would be to kind of create sympathy for himself. So if you're someone with like narcissistic traits, a lot of things that you do, you turn it around to be like, oh, but that was so hard for me. So it wouldn't be outside of the realm of possibility for him to hire a hit on his mom, because then he could be like, oh, my mom got killed and I built this thing for her, but she never got to see it, and this is just so hard for me because like my mom is gone now and she can't see the person that I've become, instead of kind of being able to like empathize with his brother about the loss of their mother. It would be one of those things where, you know, if he did that, there might be a little bit of guilt, maybe. Very heavy on the maybe for the guilt about if he did actually hire the hit on his mom, because that's, I don't know if he's capable of feeling guilt for some of his actions. So, you know, it's kind of one of those things where it's not, I think I could see that. I could really see that, and it would line up with kind of the stuff that he does later in the campaign, you know?
Yeah, and because I think the thing is, too, because I know one thing in Strahd that pointed out immensely about Strahd is, like, he cared about people, but it was kind of like that whole, if you didn't experience it, like, the vibe I got from reading it is, like, if you didn't experience what I experienced, I'm not attached to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was
I
very...
also think I think the caring for him is very transactional as well. I think he's one of these people that, like, if he's going to care for you, he expects something in return.
Right. Yeah, because it's very, like... Because, again, that's probably back to the whole military raising of just,
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, he's a leader, he's a noble, everyone is supposed... That is just
Mm-hmm.
the way it is. Like, he's a nobleman. He's part of the von Zarovich. The von Zarovich family is known for generals and warriors and stuff like that. Like, he is
Mm-hmm.
the next bringer of that. So there has to be that inherent of respect me because of my family name. Like, obviously
Mm-hmm.
he didn't lean on it. Like, Strahd, like, in himself when he was alive, was compassionate to his men. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but it outside of, like, the close band of warriors that fought alongside him, and, like, maybe
Mm-hmm.
his men to some degree, he didn't generally seem to care.
Yeah, and even kind of like, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, even with like his relationship with the Vistani, it's very transactional.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, they saved him, but now they're spies for him. So it's still a very transactional relationship between him and that group because that's all he views people as. So, like, for example, well, I'm going to use an example from like our campaign. The fact that like he hung Evangeline's mom over her head and
Fucking...
was like, I will do this. I have your mom. I can like, he kind of hung that and was like, "Oh, I'll help you. Don't worry about it." But like, you need to do these things for me. And
Yeah.
even like I think about the whole Mother Night amulet situation where it was a transactional thing for him where he's like, "You give me this, I'll give you that," type thing.
Yeah. Because that was very, like... Yeah, because, again, that's part of his manipulation, is clearly
Mhm.
he is someone that, yeah, is very transactional. Like,
Mhm.
it's business for him. Like, that's part of the... And part of it is part of the game, too, because, you know, like,
Mhm.
he is above... Like, when he becomes a vampire, he is above those mortal needs or wants. He doesn't really need to eat. He doesn't need to sleep. He doesn't need mortal possessions, but he has them because those are
Mhm.
ties he had when he was alive. Yeah, like, sure, he's a vampire because he is utmost first a von Zarovich before he is a vampire.
Mhm.
Because that's one of the few traits about his personality that gets exaggerated when he gets pulled into Ravenloft, is the fact that he is a noble first, then a monster. But
Mhm.
obviously with nobility, it's that usual trope of, like, I have pretty nice things, and I'm, like, some depictions of Strahd, like, have him as a very, despite being, like, 400 to 600 years old, depending on how much you age Strahd,
Mhm.
he's, by all rights, like, attractive. Like,
Mhm.
he's not, like, you know, like, the super, like, he's not, like, the generic, like, super, like, hot guy, but
Mhm.
there's enough of a physical attraction as well as his natural charisma that he is fairly attractive. And that's also, again, the whole thing with vampires, is the whole, like,
Mhm.
human side of, like, seduction and being like, ooh, let me
Mhm.
whisper these nice things into your ear, and then I get what
It's
I
like, let
want.
me whisper some sweet nothings into your ear, baby.
Yeah, pretty much. Because obviously we all, like, everyone knows, like, a lot of people know that a lot of vampires are based off Dracula, and obviously
Mhm.
Strahd has a lot of the same features that Dracula has. Like, he's a nobleman that lives in a castle in the middle of nowhere. He has
Mhm.
beautiful women surrounding him, and Escher.
Mhm.
And
Can't forget Escher.
yeah, we can't forget about Escher, because Strahd has male and female companions. So
Mhm.
it's a case of, like, there's a little bit of that noble eccentricity, if you want to put it that way. Like, probably not
Mhm.
the best way to put it, but, like, compared to, like, most other, like, noble families, obviously being like, oh, you have male and female consorts, that's rather scandalous, you know?
Oh, it's so scandalous. Do they show you do they show you the ankles?
Yeah. But
You know, but yeah, it's the thing. Like he's got that appeal that like men and women and everybody in between are like, oh, Strahd. Well, except Tatiana, but you know.
yeah. But yeah, to kind of rebound back into the story a little bit, I know we trailed off very aggressively. But yeah, so Strahd campaigns through Barovia. He conquers and pushes out the natives, you know, the general story of fucking imperialism and stuff like that. And he builds Castle Ravenloft, where he invites his living family, because by this point, while he's out campaigning in Barovia, Baroff dies of, I think, old age. I think he just flat out dies. It's either old age or he dies in a fight, but I think it's old age.
Yeah.
So not that kind of warrior death. He just kind of dies because we all eventually die. And once he conquers Barovia, he builds Castle Ravenloft, fights his family over, may or may not have killed his mom. Speculation. And then Sergei comes. And it's interesting because the first interactions between Strahd and Sergei, because that's the thing, is while Strahd was out campaigning and Sergei was fighting the religious kind of front of becoming a preacher, they hadn't really seen each other. Like, they hadn't really interacted. Like, most of the information that Strahd would have gotten about Sergei was through his mom. So when they first kind of meet, there's just this kind of moment of, like, you know, the general pleasantries and whatnot. But there's also this, like, I would have to pull up the passage again in particular, but there's this moment where Strahd is just observing Sergei and just kind of taking in the fact that Sergei looks younger. He doesn't look stressed. He doesn't look like this is, like, Strahd kind of concludes that Sergei has lived an easy life. Like, he's not had to go through the struggles that he had to go through, and it upset him. Because, and, like, he pokes and prods at Sergei a little bit, but Sergei takes it as a joke, because, you know, your older sibling, like, haha, funny joke, I get it, I'm the younger kid, you know, like, I lived an easier life. And the funny thing is, like, I think at one point in the book, and again, I haven't read the book, like, it's been years since I've read the book, so take what I say with a grain of salt in terms of, like, where everything is placed, but if I remember at one point, Sergei and Strahd actually do have a duel, and despite, like, Sergei, like, being this holy man, he actually puts Strahd on the back burner in terms of being a warrior. Like, he actually beats Strahd in, like, a duel.
Oh, that's interesting.
So there's also that general resentment of, like, I feel like there's also a level of resentment of, like, Strahd has been doing this his whole fucking life, and then here comes his brother with fancy robes and everything and beats him. So
That would definitely knock down, especially somebody with Strahd's ego. That would definitely sting, because, like you said, he looked at Sergei and was like, "Oh, you had an easy life. You haven't aged. Like, war and being outside in general makes people age. You know, just from like the hardships and stuff and everything on your face and that kind of exposure to the elements and da 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 da. So like having, first of all, his brother looking young and youthful and not stressed out, and then to have this young, youthful, probably in Strahd's mind, inexperienced in combat, to put him in his place, like that's gonna cause some resentment there.
yeah, that's going to hurt. And it also kind of put into perspective that Strahd is getting old. Because the fact that, like, I imagine, like, if it was Prime Strahd fighting Sergei, I think Prime Strahd would have won. But by this point, we gotta remember, by the time he conquers Barovia, he's an older man, like, old for the ages back in the day. Like, so we'd say, like, early to mid 40s, which back then, obviously, that's like you're halfway, like, your foot's already, like, you're basically in the grave.
Oh, you've already surpassed the age that you were supposed to die at. My God.
Yeah, and Sergei was, like, you know, late 20s to like at least mid 20s. Like, he was like mid 20s, early 30s. Which, again, like, Sergei was a young lad, but he wasn't like he wasn't like baby, but he was old enough to where obviously he was still in his prime. And I feel like not only the fact that Sergei outclassed him, but it's also the age factor, I think, plays into it too. Because, like, obviously there might be some resentment of, like, you know, I'm getting old while he's still, like, in his prime, meh. But that also, I think that problem only accentuates with Strahd, because when Sergei goes off to a village that is under Barovia's wing, he meets a young common woman by the name of Tatiana. And that's where a lot of the problems begin, because, well, there were already problems beforehand, but I think this was the powder keg that blew things up. Is the young... Yeah, he was only human.
Yeah.
And the thing that blows over with Tatiana is the fact that Tatiana wasn't, like, a noble girl or anything. She was just a random commoner. Like, she wasn't anyone of note. She wasn't anyone important. The only thing of note was the fact that she was pretty. Like, I'm not trying to, like, downplay her as a character, but it's just, like, legitimately, the only thing that was of note of Tatiana is her and Sergei shared kind of a similar view on things, and they fell in love. And what hurt Strahd is the fact that it's like, again, Tatiana was fairly pretty. I'm not going to deny that. But what hurt Strahd is the fact that he kind of around that point began to realize, especially with his interactions with Tatiana, is the fact that he was old. Because she didn't mean it as a slight, but Strahd took it as a slight, where she would refer to Strahd as, like, an elder. Like, obviously she meant it because he was wise and smart, because Strahd is a very educated and well-thought-through man.
Yeah. It's a term of, like,
endearment.
At the time, it's a term of respect.
Yeah.
You know? Term of being like, this man, he's my elder because he's, like, wise, he's seen some stuff, he's like lived a decent life for how old he is. But with somebody with Strahd's ego and his pride, yes, that would be a slight, because that kind of digs into the fact that, oh, I'm getting old, you know, like my knees crack when I stand up.
Yeah, and it's like, and it's like, yeah, and it was the fact that, like, even though Strahd was charming even back then, she wasn't swayed, because, again, she saw him not only as an elder, but she basically saw Strahd as a big brother figure. Because, you know, Sergei, like, and I think, to me, that's kind of says a lot about Strahd, too, is because Strahd, I'm sure, at any point could have, if he actually, like, while establishing Barovia, went out and tried. Like, I'm not saying he probably didn't try at some point, but I feel like if he would have had the opportunity to interact and find someone that cared about him as much as Tatiana cared for Sergei, I think the story could have diverged into something completely different, where Strahd had someone to ground him, or to make him maybe unconditioned himself a little bit, become softer. But yeah, like Arrow points out, there's a level of sense of vanity there, because he's the head of the house. He is the land. He is Barovia. He should have what is rightfully his within his land. And as far as he was concerned, Tatiana is his property.
Yeah, there's a sense of entitlement.
Yeah, there. And then here comes his brother out of nowhere taking his property. Like, I feel disgusted to refer to Tatiana as property, but in this metaphorical conversation, I feel like that's the way Strahd would see her. Is
even his interactions with Irina, he sees her as property. He doesn't see her as a person, because the comment that he makes at, you know, this is a little spoiler for our campaign, but, you know, at the wedding, where he's like, you're mine. Like, come with me. I'm tired of these games. You're mine. You belong with me.
Yeah. And it's just that vanity, and it's just like, it's like, and I feel like, and that to me is at that point too, as time goes on where Sergei stays in Barovia and spends time with Tatiana, and Strahd is interacting with Tatiana. Like, he doesn't just, like, interact with her once and then get all huffy. Like, he spends as much, if not more, time with her than Sergei does. But there's still that level of disconnection where Tatiana doesn't see his advances as an advancement of a lover. She sees it, like, she basically kind of brushes him off as the elder or the big brother to her. And over time, it eventually kind of frustrates Strahd, because it's like, why does he get to have her and I don't? And I think that too also kind of begins boiling into a lot of, like, the other relationships Strahd have, because around certain points, Strahd has to deal with assassins. Like, Strahd, like, which is typical kind of, like, medieval affair, which is, you know, like, some noble's gonna get pissed at you and put a hit on you, and, like, you know, that usual shtick. But the assassins that were sent to kill Strahd, I'm going to butcher this name, are called the Bazelli, which are basically kind of think the typical kind of, like, they're basically like the secret order of assassins that, like, you only say in whispers. But what makes the Benalzis so scary is the fact that they have a special kind of dagger. And funny enough, this is the dagger that Valentina uses.
Oh,
it's a special kind of dagger that has a level of blood hunger to it, and is so potent and deadly in terms of dipped into the magics that surround it. It doesn't matter how much protection you wear, it will cut through it. So it is a you have an order of assassins with a weapon that is built for pure hatred and assassinations, going after Strahd. And they do make an attempt on his life. Like, they nearly get him, but there were interventions from a few of his knights that were pretty close to him. And Strahd not only kills the assassins, but also gets a hold of one of their daggers. And this thing is a vile weapon, to put it very bluntly. It is a weapon that is sheathed in human skin, and is rumored to be only cursed. It is cursed to where you can't sheath it unless it is drawn blood. And Strahd gets a hold of this weapon, and he kind of, for a moment, wants to throw the dagger away, but he keeps it. And that dagger will come up later relevance. So after the assassination attempt, obviously Strahd becomes a lot stricter with things, because, you know, he nearly got fucking killed.
When you almost get murder, you kind of gotta, like, be a little stricter with some things, you know? And things kind of tighten up. And now, here's where kind of, like, we divulge a little bit from the Tome of... from Ice Strahd, and more so into the Tome of Strahd a little bit. That adds a little bit more kind of involvement of the other beings, especially the Dark Powers. Because there is a temple that gets mentioned in the Tome of Strahd that Strahd at first completely ignores, because it is just rumors, that an order of knights were protecting, and that was called the Amber Temple. And people avoided that area because, you know, it's like it's one of those areas that, like, you hear crazy shit happening, and you just don't go near it, because, again, mythology and beliefs in the world of D&D actually exist. Like, there are owlbears, dragons, shit like that. And the Ember Temple is no different. It is a scary, desolate place that was protected by an order of knights that at some point abandoned it, whether that was because of Strahd's invasion, or just simply the order not having enough people to man it, or other factors. But Strahd finds his way to the Amber Temple, and he makes a deal. He makes a deal
with a particular vestige by the name of Vampire. And
yes.
the deal with, and keep in mind, this is something like, this is while Strahd is having to deal with Tatiana, like, hitting on Tatiana, running the land of Barovia, and doing his own personal studies. Because Strahd is also a bit of a scholar. Like, he does research into things, and he wanted to know more about the land around him. And the Amber Temple is something that comes up. Like, I know in the canonical story of our Strahd, he just kind of, like, skips over the actual interaction with Vampire, but I like the idea that he personally, physically visits the Amber Temple. He finds it in a study in a tome somewhere, or perhaps there was a local that made mention of it. Or perhaps when he sacked Argynvostholt, he acquired their records of the temple. And he makes his way over there, fully expecting some stuff to happen. And he makes a deal.
Yeah, I like the idea of him physically going as well, because I think that brings a bit more... I'm trying to think of the word, but I like that idea where, like, he physically goes. Maybe he kind of does the same thing where, like, you know, we did in the campaign, where he goes to, like, different ones to talk to them and that kind of stuff. Maybe kind of, like, feeling them out a little bit just to see, and then he gets to Vampires, and that's when he's like, oh, this one is, like, I like this one, you know?
Yeah, and that's something that, and I think too, and that's something too, is Strahd's getting older, he's getting weaker. He's already had an assassination attempt on him once. Who's to say that the nobles around him getting tired of his shit won't do it again? And to add on to that factor, he's trying to get Tatiana's attention. He wants her. And then, around the time before he goes to the Amber Temple to make the deal, news hits his ears that he doesn't want to hear. Which is Sergei and Tatiana enter into his study where he's learning about this Amber Temple. Sergei looks him in the eyes and basically goes, can me and Tatiana get married in Castle Ravenloft? And that would strike a chord with him. Because after the relentless longing, the stresses of being a leader, and just trying to pursue her, he's effectively lost the game. Her heart goes to Sergei. And he's not happy about this. He thinks of every time she calls him an old one, an elder, big brother, whatever, and he gets angry. He snaps. He obviously, he doesn't say it to their face. He kind of lets them do what they want to do. But in the back of his mind, I feel like that's the point of just the Strahd that we, like, the living Strahd, that is when we first lose him. That is, at this point, he's an old, embittered, angry man that wants to take something that was rightfully his that he never had claim to. And he wants it, and he's willing to do everything. And that includes making a literal deal with a forgotten primordial god. And I don't know, like, do you think there would have been a way for Sergei to approach this with Strahd at this point to not make it a case of him snapping to this point? Or do you think by this point he was gone?
That's a good question, actually. I think that maybe there could have been. Now, whether or not Strahd, what it's going to come down to is if Strahd would have been receptive to what Sergei was going to say. So I think if he was going to approach this a different way, one thing would be to not show up with Tatiana, first of all. I think if he had sat him down as kind of like a brother to brother conversation to be like, listen, like, I know you have feelings for her. I also have feelings for her. And she's disclosed that she has feelings for me. We want to get married in Castle Ravenloft. Is that okay? Like, let's talk about how this is gonna, like, let's talk about how this is affecting you. Because I know you've been after her, but she's not interested. And I think if they had sat down and maybe kind of like hashed it out a little bit as brothers and kind of had that mature adult conversation to be like, yeah, it sucks that she's like not into you, but like, I'm your brother. Don't you want me to be happy? That kind of stuff. Like, I do want you to be happy. Da 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 da. I mean, maybe in Strahd's mind, like Arrow said, he lost the second game to Sergei. The first slight was he beat him in the duel. Now he lost the woman that he believed was his, which is a whole other issue in itself. So maybe even if they had sat down, maybe he wouldn't have been receptive. That might have still sent him over the edge, because it would have been like, okay, first of all, I think it comes back to the perception of Sergei's younger. Sergei looks younger. You know, like Strahd, as you said, he's probably 40s at this point. Not old, but if we're going by like medieval standards of age, that's kind of old.
Yeah, like
You
he's
know?
he's basically like retirement home fucking
Yeah. Take him out to the field, kind of
yeah,
old Yeller style,
pretty much,
But
yeah.
that's the thing, is like he has the perception of himself that he's powerful and he is someone that people should find him desirable. And the fact that she doesn't find him desirable, but finds someone who has similar traits to him, like physical traits, because they do kind of look alike as brothers. But in his mind, Sergei's just like the younger, handsomer version of himself. Like, I think even if Sergei had sat him down as a one-to-one, I don't think it would have changed the outcome. I think he still would have been slighted, and he still would have been like, all right, well, I want to get this woman no matter what it takes, because I'm better than my brother. Like, I'm the firstborn. I have the title. I've conquered all these lands and everything. I built this castle. And all those kind of like narcissistic building himself up.
So, and obviously that is the point where, again, yeah, because that's the thing is like I don't want to think Sergei was willfully ignorant of Strahd's frustrations. I imagine Sergei in my heart of heart, obviously, because he is Strahd's brother, and I think Sergei cares for Strahd. I feel like, to a degree, Sergei, whether subconsciously knows that maybe Strahd is experiencing loneliness, and like that's why Sergei wanted to be there with him, was to offer that case of like, I know you didn't have an easy life and I want to help you, but unbeknowingly, due to that willingness to be helpful to his sibling, he doesn't realize that he is the problem. And maybe that's just a case of just, again, like, Sergei's a little sheltered, but yeah, it depends on how. Yeah, that could also be another point, is maybe Strahd was emotionally stunted too. Like, maybe he did become like his father, or even worse in some ways. Because again, through all the trauma, because war is traumatic. Like, war changes people. Because we don't.
Yeah.
Because we won't know. We will never truly know what Strahd would have been like if he didn't become the warrior and the general. Like, he did ultimately become his father to some degree, but not in the good way.
Yeah. And that's the thing as well, is trauma in general does things to the body and the brain, and it rewires a lot of things. And you never really feel safe. You never really feel that you're able to kind of relax in a sense. So kind of the way that I describe it to my clients who have trauma and everything is you're constantly in fight or flight mode, and your body doesn't understand a non-threat can't differentiate between a non-threatening situation and a threatening situation. So like the instance of Sergei and Tatiana approaching him being like, "Hey, we want to get married," and all this kind of stuff, because of everything that he's gone through, that could be perceived as like a threatening situation to him, you know?
Yeah.
That could be seen as something that causes him the fight or flight. So it's actually fight, flight, or freeze is kind of the three that they've done. I also seen fawn, but but that's the thing. So it's either a fight or flight. So either he's gonna fight this that's come up, which is kind of what he does by making the deal, or he's gonna flight, which is kind of ignore it, push it to the back of his head.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is I think Strahd is someone that will always fight, because that was what he was raised to do, was fight, 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 fight. He will never run, he will always fight. And that's the problem, is he never... If he doesn't put down the sword. He never has put down the sword. Like, the moment the sword was put in his hands by his father, or Rahadin, or whoever you want to blame, he never put it down. Up until he made the deal and became undead, he never put down the sword. And that was something I think weighed on him, to the point where it's like, what did he have to offer outside of being a warrior and a tactician? He didn't have anything.
Yeah, and if he's also grown up in that war general fighting, he never really had the time to kind of work on social skills, if you think about it that way as well. So, like, depending on how he was approaching Tatiana, because I think in the source material on D&D Beyond, it says he was throwing gifts and stuff at her.
Yeah, he was doing the whole transactional way of approaching things. It's like the whole, like, I give you gift, now you give me love. And it's like, that's not... like, signs of affection are okay with, like, gifts. Like, you can... Like, you should always be giving... Like, if you want to give people gifts as a sign of affection, that's fine, but you should never expect anything in return. And that's something I think Strahd struggled with, was because he was used to... I feel like that's also that military general mindset, where it's like, I give you a thing, you do something for me in return. Because it's that whole... Because, again, it's a business transaction. It's a order from your superior to do this for him. And that doesn't translate well to people that don't live in that mindset, or it bounces off. Because, again, Tatiana was a commoner. She wasn't anyone of note, any rapport. She had no military history. So, like, again, this was just her just probably receiving these gifts and going like, see, Sergei, you do have a very nice brother. And it's just...
And it also depends, like, not to get into the whole, like, romance side of it, but we're going to do it anyways. It also depends on, like, they probably didn't have love languages back in Barovia. But, it depends on the love language. So maybe, like, if Strahd had the chance to kind of examine himself, maybe that was his love language, is gift giving. And that's how he shows affection. But maybe, for example, say Tatiana's love language is acts of service or quality time. It's kind of like... that doesn't really match up in a sense. So, like, he could be like, I'm showing you I love you by giving you these gifts. But Tatiana could be someone that's like, okay, well, I want someone to show me that they love me by spending time with me. Or maybe, like, coming to help me in the field or something. I don't know what kind of work I don't know if she worked or anything, but, something like that.
It just basically makes it sound like she's just an everyday commoner. Like, it doesn't give...
Yeah.
It doesn't say where her family's... Like, again, she's just literally... She doesn't exist until she exists. Like, that's basically kind of how they wrote her and kind of how they present her, is basically... Because, again... And that's something I think that's also points to another trait that we could point towards. Sergei, if they got along that well to the point where, like... By the time at their wedding, like, the two basically are like, I can't live without you. Like, I think that points into another direction of, like, the way Sergei is. Like, yeah, his love language. Because Sergei clearly seemed to be the opposite of Strahd. Like, he is the one that's like, I want to spend time with you, or I do these acts of service.
So that's the thing. So like if we're gonna look at it, maybe Sergey, let's say Sergey's is quality time, for example. He likes quality time, and maybe his is words of affirmation or something. And where they've spent time together, like Sergey and Tatiana have spent time together talking, they're gonna learn this stuff. And that's kind of the thing with building a foundationship for any relationship, whether it's a romantic one, whether it's a friendship one, is spending time with people, learning about them, learning their interests, learning how they respond to different things, so you can kind of like adjust. Because relationships, whether it's romantic, friendship, anything like that, it's a two-way street. So, you know, Sergey could have learned that Tatiana likes quality time, and he would be like, okay, so she likes it when I spend time with her, so I'm going to go out of my way to make time in my day, even if it's just like an hour where we just sit and talk. And Tatiana's going to see that as like, wow, he really likes spending time with me, he enjoys my presence, he's taking time to get to know me, and that kind of stuff. Whereas Strahd would just kind of, you know, his intentions of getting to know her was not sincere.
Yeah, like, and that's the thing, too. It's like, he's throwing gifts at her, and clearly there is that motive of, like, apprehendus of, like, he might love her, in a sense, but it's a twisted love. It's not the same love that Sergey has, where Sergey has that natural, hey, I've spent time, I'm getting to know you as a person, where it feels like Strahd has more of, like, I want you because someone else wants you. And maybe...
I think Strahd, I don't think it was actually love. Yeah. I think it was more of a lust thing.
Yeah, because it's something another thing his brother had that he didn't. Which was, because again, Sergey by all rights lived a comfortable, cushy life, which is something Strahd never had. He had more love and affection from his mother when he was born, which is something Strahd was missing. He got the brutal military regime between Rahadin and his father, but Rahadin, I feel like, fulfilled to a degree that other parental role for him, so that's why he still trusts Rahadin, because Rahadin may have been the softer of the two between Barov and him, because Rahadin did care, like, Rahadin does care for Strahd, but Rahadin is not his mother. And that's another thing Sergey has.
Yeah.
And now here comes this random peasant woman that Strahd has never heard of or cared to know, and suddenly he's gonna get married. He's found someone that actually gives a shit about him outside of, like, military affairs. And who knows, they could have kids. Like, and that adds to the consecutive blows to Strahd's psyche of just, I feel like, of just, like, that's another thing that Sergey, because I do feel at the end of the day, Sergey and Strahd's relationship, like, Sergey viewed him as a brother. Yeah. Strahd viewed Sergey as a rival. Like, someone to, like, there's nothing wrong to having kind of a rivalry within siblings if it's healthy and you're both, at the end of the day, remembering that you're there to love each other and to be siblings. And I don't think Strahd had that when they were separated and now they're back together. There was no time for that connection. Yeah. There was no time for Strahd to have that mental click of, like, he's my brother, he is my family, he is my blood, and I love him. It's just, you come back into my life and you take everything away from me every time you're around. You are not my brother, you are my rival.
Yeah. He's been conditioned, in a sense, to view Sergey as a rival. Because it's like, you know, he, like you said, he sees him as something that takes away good things from Strahd. So, like, he took away his mother's attention. Yeah. So Strahd didn't get that. Now he's taking away the woman that he, quote unquote, loves, even though I think it's definitely more of a lust thing than an actual love thing. So every time, it's kind of like, you know, every time Sergey shows up, and we could even tie it back to his mom dying, whether or not Strahd was the one behind it. He's gonna see that as, okay, well, you two were traveling together and she died. You were there. So he's gonna associate that with Sergei. He's gonna associate, like, any negative situations, any negative feelings, they become associated with Sergei. And he's been conditioned to associate only negative things with his brother.
Yeah. And I genuinely think, like, like, I know it's never gonna happen, because, again, obviously these stories need to have the kind of endings that they have, because
Mm-hmm.
we need the bad guy, we need the backdrop, we need to figure out why he is like this. I
Yeah.
genuinely believe that if Strahd, with all this pent up frustration, like, I imagine even if he blew up at his brother and, like,
Mm-hmm.
vented all this frustration, all this anger towards him, I feel like that would have been better for their relationship. Like, if
Yeah.
Strahd straight up was like, even if it was kind of a dick thing, like, if he blew up and go, like, how dare you rub your life in my face, I
Mm-hmm.
could imagine that, like, Sergei, like, I don't think Strahd would have eventually listened to what Sergei had to say, but I think
Mm-hmm.
what would have saved and prevented the tragedy that becomes Barovian, I know we joke about Strahd being an incel and everything, but I genuinely think that by the time that we get to the warrior and conquering phase of Strahd,
Mm-hmm.
he is a broken man. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think he was ever right. Like, the moment the innocence of childhood got stripped away from Strahd, he was broken.
Yeah.
Like,
He
was
never really got to be, if you think about it, sorry, cut you off. He never really got to be a child.
exactly.
Like, from the young age, because I think he's like, what, that first tome chapter, he's like 11 or something, maybe?
Yeah, he's young. Like, he's a
He's
kid.
young.
Yeah, like, he's a kid going into teenager type shit.
Yeah, so he got robbed of his childhood. Obviously, we don't know in our campaign what his childhood was like before Sergei came along. We don't know if, like, maybe his father was, you know, more attentive, more loving and stuff. And then once Sergei came along, he was like, okay, so now there's another child, but I'm going to now, like, we're in training mode. Like, we're go time.
Yeah.
To teach my son how to be a man, you know? Like, be a man, Strahd.
Yeah, and that's the general vibe that I got when I first read the tome, is the fact that it's like, the moment his wife came to him and basically told her the moment he came to her husband and was like, I'm pregnant, Baroff got what he wanted. He got his son. Like, not Sergei, his version of a son through Strahd.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, again, I genuinely, like, again, I know I go back on this point, but it's like, I genuinely believe that since we do not get as much information about King Baroff and his wife, Strahd's mother, we can ascertain what they could have been like through their kids. And I personally genuinely believe that Strahd is the epitome of King Baroff, and Sergei was his mother.
Yeah. I mean, even what we get from the tome, just kind of the brief where we eavesdrop on the parents and Rahadin having a conversation about Strahd. I'm pretty sure, I'm trying to rack my brain. I could pull out my notebook for this and look through it.
I do have the tome.
Sure I had that written down.
I do have the tome too, if you need me to clarify.
I think it's like, I feel like his mom makes a comment to Baroff about not being hard on Strahd.
Yes.
If I'm remembering that correctly, and he, like, brushes her off.
Yes. Because, again, he has 2 sons now, and again, like, it's that typical kind of, like, noble family shit where it's like the first son, like we've already said, the first son takes over, and the second son is basically kind of chopped liver. Like, he's the backup. He's there if, like, something happened to Strahd, but they're not going to put as much attention on him, so...
Yeah.
Basically...
That's an interesting point, the backup. So, say, for example, say Strahd died. as a child.
Yeah,
Let's
what
just hypothetical.
Yeah, we'll say for instance in the siege of Argynvostholt, where that javelin that gets thrown by that random paladin or whoever threw it actually
Yeah.
kills him, and the Vistani don't come to save him.
Or say they do, and he dies. It's too late.
Yeah, it's too late.
So Strahd, let's just say Strahd's out of the picture now. There's only one son. Who is Barov going to turn his attention to?
Yeah.
Now that there's only one, he's going to turn it to Sergei and try and mold Sergei now.
Yeah, and by this point, Sergei was a holy man, and just more than likely, the resistance between Barov and Sergei on that point would have been phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that would have been... As harsh as this sounds, I don't think Sergei would have been as good of a leader as Strahd was.
No, he definitely wouldn't have. I think at that point, he was probably too far into the religious stuff, and I think trying to, like, remold, because Sergei was probably an adult at that point as well.
Yeah.
I think trying to, like, remold an adult is a lot harder than trying to... Actually, it is. Trying to remold an adult to kind of undo some of their thinking or thinking patterns or behaviors or anything is a lot harder to do it. Is a lot harder than if you were doing it with a child, because children are very impressionable and they're easy to kind of mold and everything, which is why, you know, these are formative years for the kids, and they remember and they like learn a lot of stuff from observation. So like Barov trying to take Sergei as an adult and be like, okay, now we're going to do some training. Like, Sergei probably would have been very resistant and would have been like, no, this is not what I want to do. I'm set in my ways. I'm a cleric of Lythander. Like, I'm content with my life.
Yeah.
And at that point, Barov was probably too old, and Ravenovia was also probably too old to have another son.
Yeah, no, because probably at this point, because especially, like, the pictures of them, like, they are clearly, like 50s easily.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I know that's also because of the artwork, because the artwork depicts them as like here, I'll actually pull up a picture of them on the screen. Like, because the picture of them clearly kind of indicates them to be very older, and I know that's like the art style of the book too, to kind of depict, kind of fitting within the art style, because, you know, Gothic art style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing. He wasn't molded early enough. Like, it was too late at that point to kind of condition Sergei to become a hardened general.
Yeah. And it just... But yeah, it's just... Yeah, no, it's a case of, like, there's... And that's the interesting thing with Strahd, is... Because, again, it's like most other villains that are very noteworthy. Like, I know it's easy to jump on the memes about him and stuff like that. But it's like, if you look at the history of the man, it's like, there are many points where he could have turned around and been like, no. But he didn't, because of either factors outside of his control or just his own personal vanity. His own need to keep his image up as someone that's in control and someone that is the lord of the land, to live up to the title of being the head of the house.
Yeah, that's the thing. So he has this expectation put on him from a young age that you're going to be the lord of the land, you need to act a certain way. And that pressure that he feels from his father, you know, maybe also pressure that he starts putting on himself. I would say definitely pressure he starts putting on himself. And then the pressure from probably, you know, when he's commanding his men and all this kind of stuff, and like taking over, building the castle. Like, you want to appear like you have everything together. You want to appear strong. You want to appear competent. You want to appear as if you are somebody that people are going to follow and be willing to follow. If he had like shown any form of weakness or cracks or anything, people would have doubted his abilities. Even if they had seen him in battle and heard him through like heard about his conquests and everything, seeing the crack would have destroyed that image for some people.
and to a degree, I feel like Strahd was destroyed, but like not in the traditional like breakdown crying. He was destroyed. I think his military career was points of him shaving away the humanity he had in him, and then when he makes the decision, when he gets to that point to make the deal with Vampire, by that point there's not much humanity left in him. There's enough to give in to the god, but there's one more bit of humanity that it holds on to, which will be something we get on later into the story.
Yeah.
Which, at this point in the story, Sergei has asked him to marry Tatiana, and Strahd has decided enough is enough. I want something that Sergei doesn't have, and I want Tatiana. So he learns about this Amber Temple, and he goes out there. And he doesn't go out there alone. He's not making this trek alone. He brings a few other people with him. He brings Exathander, the court wizard at the time. And he also brings up another person, which I haven't talked about, but they are relevant to his backstory, which is Alexandra. Alexandra, she was a warrior that fought along Strahd. Like, she was one of his notable, like, knights. Basically, kind of, if Rahadin wasn't there to be his right-hand man, she is his left hand. And so here's where the Ice Strahd and this story kind of divulge, because, like I said, like, he makes the deal at the wedding, but I like this version better because this shows away the Tome of Strahd version shows how much he's willing to give up to get what he wants, which points back to the whole shredding away humanity.
Yeah.
Which is, he goes down into the Amber Temple with Exathander and Alexandra, and basically throws himself at the powers to be in there. Basically being like, I want this, and I want it now. And the first one to respond is Vampire. And Strahd sees Vampire and basically goes, are you deaf? Have you come for me? Because at this point, I don't give a shit. Because that's something Strahd has had to do, is he makes his way in this temple, he's had to fight the things that reside down here. Like, he's not had the best of times in this temple. And then here comes Vampire, revealing himself in a form that would very much be like, oh shit, is this the personification of death? But Vampire basically goes, no. I've come to you, and you have given me what I've wanted, which is slaughter. And as a reward, I will give you back your youth, and I will remove your rival from your path, and you will never age again. So Strahd obviously does that. And that is when he gives up most of his humanity. That is when we lose Strahd the human, and we start getting, that's when the influences of Vampire start showing up. This is when Strahd's humanity is slowly getting stripped away from him, and he becomes a vampire. And his first thing he does when he becomes a vampire is turn on one of his well-trusted advisors, one of his companions, Alex, and drains her to death. No remorse, no apologies, kills her. And continues the hunt like a feral beast. Why I say that isn't the last of Strahd's humanity is something that happens during the wedding. And it's a point that I think, to a degree, could have been a redeeming factor for Strahd. Like, this was fate giving him one last chance to change his mind. and that was the wedding of Tatiana and Sergei. Because a little bit backstory on that, a little bit more of a backdrop on that too, is around this time too. Like I said, the nobles and everything were plotting against Strahd. Like the Beldazi did not work out, and they basically could not kill Strahd, and they basically said, "Fuck you, I'm not trying that again." So a few nobles, including some of his own men, decide to throw a coup. And the best way they thought of doing it was all the nobles and everything that was under the basically friends of Strahd and Sergei would be in one place. So basically they were going to do the general kind of coup d'etat, like Dragon Age Origins, we're going to backstab everyone thing, where it's like, oh, they're all in the chapel. Yeah, like backstab, which is just, we're going to lock everyone in the chapel and just kill them all. Like, kill all the servants that are loyal to Strahd, gain control of the castle, keep them trapped within the cathedral, and just murder them. Because eventually, at some point, even if they did survive with the few warriors in there, they're going to starve to death. There's no way out of the cathedral. Unbeknownst to anyone else, obviously Strahd made the deal. Strahd, at this point, is kind of in that weird middle ground of being immortal and not. He hasn't fully completed the pact with Vampire, but he has gotten some of the benefits of the pact, which is he looks a lot younger. He looks more lively, to a sense. There is a notable difference with Strahd of being a little bit paler, but most people just assume that's because, Strahd's old.
Yeah.
On the night of the wedding, when everyone was gathered in the church and Tatiana, fully ready, dressed the happy bride with the happy groom, began saying their wedding vows, the bells ringing, and everything was fine. Up until the door shuts and screams could be heard outside of the walls as the coup not only fires off, it timed perfectly with what Strahd wanted to do, and that was kill his brother. So up on the altar wall, everyone's distracted with the noises that come from the coup firing off, people dying. Strahd takes that dagger he got from the assassin, digs it into his brother's back, and then drains him.
Yeah.
Completing the pact with Vampire and quintessentially becoming the vampire lord that he is. And around this time too, and I'm going to kind of blend in the Strahd account of this too, because I think both of them, because I think the Tome of Strahd one also kind of covers it too, but I think the Strahd also takes in a lot of the kind of irony of this. Is Sergei goes down, Tatiana immediately notices that Sergei is dying, and she flees. She doesn't flee because she isn't concerned for obviously her lover, but it's just like, everything's going on, and it's that fight or flight where it's like, like, there are people in the room just cutting down people. There's screaming, there's fighting, and Sergei just drops, and Strahd looks also confused, and she runs. And I'm honestly convinced, is the Dark Powers at this point intervening, because a deal was made, and the Dark Powers see what is going to happen, and they're watching this. Because a detail in Strahd that gets mentioned is, this is when the Mist of Ravenloft come into play. As all this is going on, it begins to rain and pour, and a curious mist begins filling the area. Because the Dark Gods are intervening. And Strahd, after killing his brother and making sure he is dead by draining him, realizes that Tatiana is gone from the chapel. And he doesn't care about the slaughter that's happening around him. his first thought is, where is my Tatiana? So he makes his way towards her, but as he's making his way, this is when he learns of the coup. When is this coup This is happening. The coup happens at the wedding of Sergei and Tatiana.
Yeah, so it happens during the wedding, and kind of, you mentioned that the wedding in our campaign was mirrored off of this situation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know Mind's Eye asked something earlier about the Raven Queen, because, you know, she's like
So
fate and all that kind of stuff. She's from the Shadowfell, right?
she has residency in the Shadowfell, but she has no control over the domains of Dread.
Okay.
The domains of Dread are basically kind of like their own pocket within the Shadowfell.
Okay.
And the beings that reside over the domain of Strahd is the Dark Powers, which the Dark Powers are nebulous, primordial entities that even the gods fear. And basically the idea behind the Dark Gods is they take people, whether through noble intent or villainous action, and basically act as wardens where they imprison them in their own gilded cage. Like, congrats, you got what you want, but you can't leave, or there's some monkey paws thing of it, which that's something we'll get to with Strahd, because Strahd is very monkey pawed with what he wanted.
Yeah. So like Sergei dies, he goes after Tatiana because he's like, I need to find my wife.
Pretty much.
She's not his wife, you know.
Pretty much. And obviously Strahd has to fight some people to get there, because obviously the coup people like see Strahd, and obviously that's the whole point of the coup is to kill him. And to the shock and horror of the coup d'etat people, Strahd is a lot stronger and faster than they remember him being. And he slaughters them. I think if I remember correctly, he doesn't even use a sword. He uses his bare hands and just rips and tears them apart. Like, he is a monster.
Yeah. So, like, that's the thing. So, kind of put yourself in the mindset of, like, one of these coup people. You're like, yeah, we're gonna kill Strahd. He's old and he's geriatric. He can't move as fast. You come face to face with him, and he's just... the way that I kind of picture this is the scene from Legend of Vox Machina where Silas murders the bandits with his bare hands.
Yeah, that's basically what it becomes. Like, because again, if this was mortal Strahd, they may have had a chance, because Strahd is a brilliant fighter and tactician, but he's old as shit. Like, his old age would have caught up with him. Like, I firmly believe if Strahd at this point didn't become a vampire, he would have died. The coup would have been successful. But unfortunately for the people that contend to the coup, he is transforming into a vampire, and he has all the wonderful benefits, such as not feeling pain, being really fast, being really strong. And basically, he rips and tears until it's done, and he gets to Tatiana. And now here's where the tome doesn't go into detail of it, but Strahd goes into it and kind of gives a little bit more context. When he finds Tatiana, she is in the courtyard. She is in the part of the castle that overlooks basically where you got the observatory, basically where you guys did your final fight with Strahd. She is at the ledge there, overlooking the valley, looking down, and she's cornered.
Yeah.
She doesn't know where to go. She doesn't know what to do. She's panicking. She's trying to figure out what happened. And then coming out of the mist is Strahd. Covered in blood, looking like almost, again, he looks horrifying.
Yeah.
But she can't tell what's wrong with him because he's covered in blood. He's pale. Like, she's not sure is that his blood? Is that other people's blood? She thinks he's bleeding out, basically. And Strahd basically says, we've been betrayed. Like, we've been betrayed. Tatiana panics and is just like, are you okay? What's going on? Where's Sergei? What's happening towards you? And a detail that the tome leaves out that Strahd does put in, and this is a detail I clearly want to make note, this is the first time that Strahd ever uses his vampiric charm. And he charms Tatiana into believing that she never loved Sergei and that she loved him.
Ooh, that's manipulative as fuck.
Yeah, so there's this moment where she goes into his arms, and Strahd has what he wants. His brother is dead. It's easy to deal with some petty mortals that are trying to kill and overthrow him, and now he has Tatiana. And they have this moment where they kind of spend time together, where he holds her in her hand and he goes in for a kiss. And she kisses him, and there's this moment where they kiss, and I'm honestly convinced this is and the dark powers, I think, once again intervene, because as soon as they kiss, she realizes that this is wrong. She realizes that you're not Sergei. What are you doing? And the reason why I think it is the intervention of the powers and not Tatiana herself is because the mists are rolling in heavier and heavier as this goes on. So that means the presence of the dark powers is becoming more prevalent. And I honestly think, as a giant fuck you for making that deal, they start their own bid of, okay, you want her? You can have her, but she needs to come to you. And without, obviously, this unwritten contract, I honestly think they break her out of the charm. They give her the success she needs to break out of the charm, and she realizes that this is wrong. And a bit of a panic as Strahd is trying to reel her back in and go like, no, you're supposed to be with me, and she doesn't listen. She would rather, and when she realizes that Sergei is dead and realizes that there's nothing left, she throws herself off the ledge and disappears into the mist. Strahd can never recover the body. The drop is over 1,000 feet, and she vanishes in the mist, and no one can find her body.
So, does she realize or learn at some point before she does this that Strahd killed Sergei, or does she not know that at all?
She does not know that. She just knows Sergei is dead. She has this realization that he is gone, and she doesn't want to be without her soulmate, and throws herself off. And
no, she threw herself. She basically
she yeeted herself to...
She fucking yeeted herself to death, because I know we probably can't say that word on Twitch. But yeah, she basically said, I'm a bird. Ka.
Kind of. Like, I know we're making light of it, but this is a woman. This is a woman that's clearly broken. She lost her soulmate on the day of what was supposed to be the happiest point in her life turned tragedy. And that...
she fucking yeeted herself. I mean, if you think about it from her perspective, she's in the fight or flight. Her husband-to-be is dead. The man that she doesn't love, or she has like a sibling love for, is trying to, like, in a sense, force himself on her. Force her to be with him. She's trapped. And, like, she, by the sounds of it, she's a flight person. She's not a fighter. She flights. She runs. So, like, logistically, where's the only way that she can go is to be like, I'm like a bird. I want to fly away into this mist.
Yeah. And it's not over yet, because this, I feel like, there's other events, but I feel like this is, I call it the, I guess I call it the final shred, where Strahd's, like, believe it or not, him turning into a vampire and everything, it's not perfect. He's still, he's basically at spawn phase. Like, he's a vampire spawn. He's not a vampire lord. He is a spawn right now. And when Tatiana throws herself off, it's not like a, oh, well, fuck. He, for the first time, I think, honestly, in a long time, after bottling everything up, all the anger, the upsetness that he had with Sergei, his life situation, and everything going on, he cries. He, like, and that to me is like, he finally hit the breaking point. That's the point where, like, he couldn't soldier on, he couldn't, just tough it out. He broke. That is the man. That's what she did. And that is the point where I think, for the briefest of moments, Strahd was himself. That was the most vulnerable for Strahd. That was the point where I feel like if Sergei was there, or if someone emotionally there to be there to comfort him and let him know, and to be there, this could have changed him. This was the point where if someone would have intervened and helped him realize what he had done, because at this point he is crying, he is he's asking himself, why did he do this? He's asking, why did he kill his brother? Why did Tatiana do that? Why did she not care? Why did everything turn out like this? He's had, I think, what is it? It's called the third act fall, or whatever, where he's broken. This is not the ruler of Barovia. This is Strahd, the man.
Yeah, he's going essentially he's going through all 5 stages of grief at once. He's going through the anger, the denial, the bargaining, and the last, which is the acceptance, I think is where, if, he kind of accepts that this is his fate. And he might as well just be like, well, everybody, she's dead, so, like, might as well just full commit to this. Because, like you said, if somebody had come up, say if even Rahadin had come up and found him a broken man and, like, comforted him, he's, like you said, he could have turned this around. He could have realized that his decisions, his arrogance, his pride, his, just the jealousy that he felt for his brother, he could have turned it around and not turned into the Strahd, the monster. He could have gained some of his humanity back and started making steps back to become Strahd, the man again.
So I will say, I'm going to kind of contradict you a little bit here, and I don't think he ever got to acceptance.
No, I don't think he ever did.
I don't think he got to acceptance until what happened next. And even then, I don't think it did. Because someone did find him. Someone did eventually find him when he had this third act breakdown, where he is a broken and weakened man. It was the leader of the coup, with several men who saw Strahd, and while Strahd is leaned over, his back turned to them, crying out for Tatiana and figuring out what is going on, several bolts of crossbows pierce his back. And that is where I believe the final shred of humanity that Strahd had died with his mortal body. With the pact fully complete with Vampire and the Dark Powers interceding and sucking Barovia into the mist, Strahd died that night, and we no longer had Strahd the man, because the thing that looked back at those villains in Strahd's eyes, the people that took everything away from him, that was not a man staring back at them, but a monster, and he slaughtered them.
Mm-hmm.
There was no courtesy. There was no... He ripped them like a savage beast. All the anger and frustration of what happened went out on them, and it was not a pretty sight.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a case of just... And with a bit of time and, like, he clears clears Castle Ravenloft. Some of the coup people escape, including the leader that witnessed Strahd rip them apart like basically a wolf in a fox in a chicken coop.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there was no fighting chance. Like, no matter how many times they stabbed and shot him, he didn't feel it, and he didn't care. He would just regenerate, rip them apart, and just keep doing it over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's the point where Strahd was no longer a spawn. He was a vampire lord. And what little bit of humanity he had left him when his mortal body, quote-unquote, died.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And obviously there's more to Strahd's tale and everything. There's obviously the... So where does the curse come in? Well, the curse involves Tatiana, because the Dark Powers give Strahd what he wants, which is Tatiana, but the beings in Ravenloft, especially Barovia, their souls never leave. They are constantly in a state of recyclement. So that also includes Tatiana. So Tatiana died. Like, obviously it's given. You yeet yourself from over 100 feet with no parachute or anything, you're gonna fucking die. Tatiana begins a vicious cycle of reincarnation, where she starts reincarnating as different people throughout Barovia. And Strahd, over time, learns about this. And there are moments where, like, Strahd, like, tries to connect with her. He tries to fix things wrong, but he's back to the whole I give you something so you give something in return mindset, where it's like...
Yeah.
Because I think one of the girls, Maria, the young girl that that Tatiana reincarnates in the village of Brez before it became a swamp, he told her, like, he flat out tells her that you are my love from another life. Like, he manipulates her, and I would argue almost borderline grooms this young girl into believing that she is going to be his wife. But then she is killed by her jealous father, who wanted her instead of Strahd. And Strahd kills... Well, he doesn't kill the father. He turns him into a ghoul and chains him up and basically lets him watch as Strahd destroys the village around him.
So was she his daughter or his stepdaughter?
Adopted daughter.
Adopted daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Because when we found him in Brez... the swamps.
Yeah.
That's what he was saying. Like, he can't have her. She's mine. She's mine. And, like, the maniacal laughter and, you know, sick fuck that he was.
Yeah, no, Maria was his adopted daughter, and originally he did treat her like an adopted daughter, but then she kind of became a little bit more attractive, and being the sick fuck that he wanted to change the adoption papers from adoption papers to marriage papers. And the father of the church at the time was kind of in his wallet and kind of was facilitating this.
Yeah, that was Father Gregor, right?
Yeah, Father Gregor.
Yeah, I just pulled out my notes. So.
And basically, they both didn't suffer. They both suffered a very nasty fate. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the point of the Dark Powers, is they're there to torture and basically be like, you're basically they trap people into a hell of their own making.
Yeah.
And some of the, like, I would personally recommend, too, from, like, here on out, like, if you read more of, like, Strahd and seeing how Strahd interacts with the world, like, it's very, I feel like the things that transferred over with him being a vampire is his transactional mindset of just, you do something for me and I will do this for you. And of course, again, having a vampire on your side is pretty fucking nice because it's a case of like the Walker families. They had Vasily Vosholt when Strahd was disguising himself as a random nobleman to back them up, and obviously he had like little connection with the Lord of the Land, and conveniently shit would get done. And it's to me, it's like the worst aspects, the things that we talked about, died with Strahd. Like the good aspects of Strahd, that what little aspects that are good, like because again, once he has that third act fall, I feel like there is that point of Strahd where he did realize he did care for his brother. He did realize all this other things, but it was too late. His brother was dead. He effectively offered his brother as a sacrifice. Tatiana may have not loved him, but she cared about him. And every person outside of Rahadin that cared for Strahd was dead. And Rahadin may be a caring figure to Strahd, like a figure that was kind of that indirect paternal figure. Rahadin is still his servant. He's still below Strahd. So even if Rahadin told Strahd what he was doing was wrong and everything else, I don't think Strahd would have changed his mind.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, from this point on, because if he was there for the third act breakdown and comforted Strahd and tried to get him to realize, hey, you did all this, but it's time to move on, like, very generally, I'm not trying to, I'm trying to be but I feel like we could have had a different villain. We could have had one that was trying to understand sympathy, trying to do other things. But we got a man that his life was decided for him, and he had no way to fight it. And finally, when he had the chance to make life what he wanted it to, he made all the wrong decisions because he had no context for what is the good decisions. And I personally, to a degree, feel he didn't have that equalizer in his life. Like, Baroff had his wife, and Sergei had Tatiana, but he didn't have anyone to be that equalizer.
No, he didn't. That's like, he was missing that person, the rational person, the like calm, the one in touch with their emotions to kind of even things out, Yeah. He didn't have that. He didn't have that person. Or he couldn't even if he didn't find that person, he didn't have the tools to like regulate himself.
So I guess that's a question I will kind of softball at you. Let's say he did find someone like that. Do you think there would be, what kind of individual, man or woman, which this is an older thing, so we'll say woman, but obviously, what kind of figure do you think would have had a better impact in Strahd's life in terms of, instead of hitting that point where he's obsessed with Tatiana? Let's just say the campaign's done, Strahd realizes that he is alone. Do you think, like, if a woman came along, like, what kind of personality, like, if there would be a personality that you think might have guided Strahd down the right path?
That's a good question, actually. I think it would have to be somebody who can be empathetic towards him. And I think empathy and having like the kindness that he lacked to kind of understand and be there to kind of help him through his troubles, and understand that he was not born this way, he was molded. So it would have to be somebody who kind of, I wouldn't say like his mom, but I think it'd be someone with similar traits to his mom, but also somebody who understands what war and pressure and like society pressure and family pressure does to a person. So it would be somebody who's empathetic, somebody who can kind of be a support, somebody who can help him see the other side of things. Someone that is trying to think of another word, but I think the biggest things would be the empathy, being there to listen, kind of, because Strahd sees a lot of things black and white. So I think he would need someone who can kind of see the gray between stuff, and someone who genuinely sees him for him and is not put off by like they would have, the biggest thing is they would have to not be put off by his cold exterior at first. You know, they'd have to be someone who's willing to kind of work through that and work to get to any bit of humanity that might be there. They'd have to be very patient because I think it would take a lot of work with him.
I I personally feel like, I know this is like completely not related to D&D, but I feel like what's her fucking name? The lady that Dracula falls in love with in the
Mina.
Castlevania. Yeah.
Oh, Castlevania. Oh, I don't know in Castlevania. I just know in
In the
uh
the Netflix Castlevania, there's the doctor woman that like Dracula eventually opens up to, and I like, again, I feel like he kind of, to a degree, would have been what Strahd would have been
mhm.
if like, I forget her name for the life of me. I'm gonna kick myself for remembering it later off
I
stream.
think it would have been so I think the ideal person would have been someone not from Barovia because Barovia, the people there know about Strahd and what he's done and everything. So I think it would have to be an outsider coming in to kind of maybe with like no knowledge about him and what he's done and kind of or maybe a bit of knowledge, but being the person to be like, okay, well, you guys are see him like this, but I want to know why he's like this. Like this, people don't just turn into a monster overnight. Like there's a process.
And I guess say, and let's say he still had he had this person. She did everything right, but
Mm-hmm.
and then the coup happened. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that the coup still happens on the wedding.
Mm-hmm.
Sergei and Tatiana and her die, but
Mm-hmm.
Strahd still lives. Do you think, with having someone like that in their life, do you think Strahd would have been would have not fallen as far, or do you think he would have fallen further?
So
If
what was the question? I'm sorry, I was looking up the Castlevania woman for you.
No, you're
Is
fine.
it Lisa?
Yeah, Lisa.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, like, if he had that equalizer, like, let's say he found an older woman around his age, he mellows out, pulls away from Tatiana, and obviously finds comfort. Then the wedding happens. He doesn't make the deal with Vampire, but he's happy for Sergei and Tatiana. The wedding still happens. The coup still happens, but everyone but him dies.
Oh, he would have fallen further.
He would have fallen further? You think
Oh,
he would have?
100%.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Because if you think about it, say he finds this person and he's like genuinely happy. That's the thing. He would be genuinely happy with this woman that he found. And maybe they were also planning to get married at some point, you know? And he's like pulled back. He's like, I'm happy for my brother and Tatiana. I have this woman. Like, we have a great relationship. We're going to get married. It's great. Having that person ripped away from you, that support basically, because that woman would have been his support, having the support just violently ripped away from you, that would send him into a spiral, because then it wouldn't be so much as I want to get what my brother has. It would be all about revenge and making people suffer like he suffered. He still makes them suffer in the current campaign, but there's a different level of suffering when you lose someone close to you, who's your confidant, who's your person, and they're taken from you in a violent way. Like, that is a whole other level of grief. and a whole other level of like sorrow and trauma, especially if he like is throwing it out there, say he watched her get murdered, you know?
Yeah.
Like that's a whole other level of grief and trauma to add, and he would spire. I think it would more so become about revenge, and I think his motives for dragging people into the mist would change. It would be more so, it'd still be a game, but it would be more so of finding people. Maybe he finds like, people who have someone that, and he's like, they have what I don't have anymore. That's not fair. I want them to suffer like I've been suffering. It would be more so about revenge and making people feel the hurt that he experienced in that moment.
So, in a sense, kind of, it wouldn't be a game of just, I'm bored. It would be a constant game of self-justification of, people would act the same way I did in this situation, and that like, if someone they loved is ripped away, they would respond the same thing I will. Kind of like a
Yeah.
self-fulfilling prophecy of just,
Yeah, I
I'm
think I think it would be that. It would be like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It would also be like for him trying to, like you said, justify his actions after the fact. And I think it would also just be kind of a little bit of a sadistic thing too, where he maybe because he suffered and like the coup people probably would be like, ha ha, you're suffering. This makes us feel good. It would also be a little sadistic thing for him, where he'd be like, these people are suffering. This makes me feel better about my suffering.
yeah, because again, I guess another reason I would think down that is kind of jumping to a different franchise, but there is a character in Warhammer 40k called Conrad Kurz that he's a twisted individual, but he has a twisted sense of justice from where he was raised from, where it was a nasty planet. And in his third act breakdown, he had something kind of similar like that happen, where he was justifying to himself all the horrible, fucked up things he did, and he would constantly bring in people to do these twisted, fucked up, like, tests on them to see if they were put in the same shoes of he did, would they respond the same he would, or would they do something different? And every time he performed these experiments to justify humanity, he would realize, like, the results were not getting what he wanted. Like, people were helping each other out, and he would constantly tweak the things to the point where, like, he eventually got the results he wanted, and he justified to himself. And I feel like that would be something that this alternative Strahd would do, where there will at some point be that adventurer that, like, despite killing their loved ones, despite doing all this horrible fucked up shit, they wouldn't respond the way he would respond. And we would have a villain that is constantly spiraling, constantly changing the rules, to constantly change the variables to where the experiment will give him the answer that he has in mind. It, like, there's no change. Like, it will be because of these variables, he gets the answer to self-justify.
I think it would kind of be, so I don't know if you've seen Dracula Untold with Luke Evans.
I'm not.
Okay. So in Dracula Untold, basically it talks about kind of how he becomes a vampire, and the only, like, he puts off becoming a vampire basically for the longest time. The only reason he does that is because his wife gets killed in the, I think it's the attack from the Turks is what happens. And they are like each other's person. And he can't imagine his life without his wife. So basically, he, seals the deal. He does the same thing that Strahd did with, like, drinking the blood and that kind of stuff. But his motivation is the fact that he's like, I don't want to lose my wife. And I think that would kind of be the same mindset. Obviously, he wouldn't, like, she'd be dead in this case, but it would be the same mindset of, I can't live without her, but because there's people out there who have what I no longer have, that's not okay.
Yeah. And I feel like in this alternative Strahd too, because the dark powers are at play.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're still assuming that the dark powers are in play.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of it being Tatiana that's constantly being revived, it would be this wife.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
whether
that's the thing. So it would be, I think it would be his wife being reincarnated, and every time he's about to like get that with her, she's taken from him again. So
yeah,
he has to constantly relive that painful moment, the trauma of watching his wife be ripped from him.
yeah, it kind of similar to what's going on with Tatiana right now, where it's
Yeah.
just like, just as when she's in his clasp, like
Hmm.
either the dark powers intercede or that version of Tatiana takes matters into her own hands.
Yeah.
And that also makes me wonder, in your opinion, what do you think the version of Strahd we have now would be more dangerous or less dangerous than this fictional one that we've kind of conjured up? Like, would a Strahd that is would a Strahd like this has that strives for something and doesn't get what he wants and then is
Hmm.
ripped away from him be more dangerous than a Strahd that finally did get what he want and then lose it?
I think the latter would be more dangerous because
Hmm.
the amount of things that like, people would do after losing someone. Like there would be I just imagine kind of gonna throw this into our campaign we just finished. Say it's a situation where like let's just say Ez did go to Ravenloft. She gets captured.
Hmm.
And he has her, we go there, we find her, and like let's just say that it's like, he obviously Strahd would have known at that point that there would have been something between like Ophelia and Esmeralda. So like he knows. He's gonna 100% dangle this in front of Ophelia and be like, "Oh yeah." And he's gonna like torture her. Would be like, "Oh, you can't have I can't have this, so why should you have this?" And that is someone who he would have no remorse. There would be no feeling like them trying to reason with him about like, you understand what this is, like why are you doing this? No reasoning with someone like that. So he would be far more dangerous in
Hmm.
that aspect than those Strahd that we had that like couldn't get what he wanted.
It's yeah, it's see, because to me this is what makes like, I know it's easy to make the running joke, and I know we make all the joke all the time, like, oh, he's an
Hmm.
incel or whatever, but I feel
Hmm.
like when you get more context for his backstory and kind of understand who he is as an individual and the possibilities
Hmm.
of what could have been.
Hmm.
Like, obviously, there's more to the tale of Strahd, and there's plenty more what we can go over. But I feel like there's enough here that I guess my question to you would be, with all the information that you've kind of learned
Hmm.
and kind of interacted with, would your how much of your opinion has changed versus what you kind of didn't know beforehand?
I mean, I think for me, he's not a good person. Let's
Yeah,
put
no.
that out there. However, there is still a part of me, and this is probably because I'm just a bitch who's in touch with her emotions. And obviously, I'm a therapist, so like I feel things for people. I feel empathy and emotions very deeply. There is a part of me that still like I hurt for Strahd, you know? Like this sounds messed up and Arrow's probably going to get a boner from me saying this, but it's one of those things where like my heart hurts, you know? Like me as a person looking at him, like, obviously in character, Ophelia don't give a fuck. But, like, Ray, the person Ray, outside of her character, I feel bad for him. I still feel bad for him. My heart hurts for him knowing that, like, he is a broken man and just knowing that there are so many ways that things could have changed. And he could have been a different person and he could have had support, but he didn't. And, like, I've seen, and I see broken people, you know, and it hurts me knowing that the circumstances that they were put through were out of their control for most part. And they've had to kind of adapt, maladapt, in a sense, to become like a hardened shell of themselves instead of being able to kind of be open about their feelings or be in touch with their feelings or being okay when things don't go their way. So, like, there is a part of me that is like, I hurt for him and I empathize with him and I want to give him a hug. You know? I want to give him a hug. Then there's the other part of me that's like, nah, fuck this man. He's an asshole. He's a terrible person. Like, he killed his own brother. He literally was obsessed with the woman that did not want him, which, like, that's an issue. That's a big issue. Like, no consent, Strahd. Consent. No means no. Silence means no. Like, consent, Strahd, okay? But, like, it's like conflicting. Like, I see both sides with him, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can't think of anything else really without going further deeper, which, I mean, again, we could be here for fucking hours talking about, like, some of the other things he's done and other adventures,
Mm-hmm.
but I think a good point of, like, catching the essence of what he was before shit gets down. Because, again, there's other things that Strahd has done, and obviously there's stories that told
Mm-hmm.
of why certain areas and certain people are the way they are in Barovia. But I think the
Mm-hmm.
true, like, genuine essence of figuring out who Strahd is as a person is what he was like in life and the
Mm-hmm.
moment he became the Dark Lord.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious about your thoughts about him and how you feel about him as a DM who's had to run him and ran him multiple times.
So my input on Strahd is Strahd to me is someone that he, again, unlike most other villains, like, every villain has the whole, like, I am a god, I'm better than you.
Mm-hmm.
Strahd, to me, gives that similar vibe of, like, I'm the main character of the story, pay attention to me. But he goes about it in such a way that it's just like, he doesn't cut the bullshit until the game is up. He
Mm-hmm.
presents himself. He's a masterclass manipulator. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I would argue he would put some of the devils, like even some archdevils, to shame when it comes to how well he can manipulate people.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally feel like the moniker the Devil Strahd fits him perfectly. He is someone that is a master manipulator. He knows how to pull feelings and
Mm-hmm.
make you sympathetic towards him. But at the end of the day, this is a transactional thing for him. He is getting something out of you, and in return, that thing he's getting out of you is his amusement. He is not a good man. I do not think he is redeemable after this long. Because in my opinion, a redeemable villain would be someone that could look at everything they've done and do the right thing to change. And I do not,
Yeah.
and I think Strahd is too far gone. I think I think the point of change that should have happened in him to make him the hero is not making that deal and dying the night of the coup. Like, that's very horrible to say, but it's like, as someone that has played him, he's not a good person. He's not.
Yeah.
He's not meant to be. He's meant to be an interesting and fascinating villain that uses his charm, his wit, and his intelligence, which that could be said for a lot of villains, but Strahd is unique in the fact that he doesn't just sit in his lair twiddling his thumbs, cackling like a mad villain. He is in your face. He wants you to remember that he is the lord of the land and you are in his game. You are the mouse to his. He is the cat, you are the mouse, and you're a plaything to him. And that, to me, is what draws so much fascination with him in a lot of his lore, is the fact that he wants you to remember that at any corner, at any point, he's right there. Like, even if you do not see him, he is always watching you. He is making sure you remember that when you're in Barovia and the mist bring you in, you are his. And that is a lot more engaging to not only the players, but also to me as the DM, where I'm not just sitting here being like, well, I guess he's just going to sit there, drink some wine, and cackle to himself. No. It gives him personality. Yeah, it gives him personality. Because I think the campaign would have been different for you all if you just heard the name Strahd and never saw him until the final act. Like,
well, so kind of on that note, that's technically what happened with Ophelia, is she never saw him until the wedding.
Yeah. Which, I mean, at that point in the campaign, there's not much I could really do. Like, I could have had him pop in more and more, but like I said, he was more focused on wooing Tatiana. I mean, not Tatiana, Irina, which he did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, he basically had what he wanted. Like, the game was over for him at that point. He had what he wanted.
Yeah.
But that's why that's why no one saw him. But that's still my point, is the fact that there's, like, I'm not saying, like, other D&D villains are boring or anything, but I feel like Strahd is a good introduction if done correctly, because Strahd is a villain that interacts with the players in the world and not just the players.
Yeah.
And to me, again, like, he's an irredeemable, manipulative, lying piece of shit, but he's fun because he is the most interactive with the players. Yeah. And to me as a DM, that is the most important thing to me, is because, again, it's more entertaining to have a villain that interacts with the players, and, like, you could feel sympathy for, you can think he's a piece of shit, or you could be on both ends. But you get more feeling from it if the villain is there and you guys and the players get the chance to learn about him. And and I think that's something with Strahd that is different compared to all the other antagonists that you guys will experience throughout a D&D career. It's the fact that there's personality and story with Strahd, and it's just a matter of figuring it out and coming to that decision of, do you think you can do better than Strahd? Yeah. And sometimes, just the way the story goes, the answer is no. Because Strahd is there to point out what you've done wrong, and point out that if the circumstances were correct and the situations are right, we all can be monsters just like him. And even if he doesn't win at the end of the day, even if the heroes succeed in sieging Castle Ravenloft, going in there and staking the vampire, I personally feel Strahd is the villain of, even if you kill me, if you prove me right, I've won. And that, to me, is what makes Strahd one of the best D&D villains out there, and I think a good introduction to, like introducing y'all as a group to D&D.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think he is one of the better villains that's out there for D&D. I haven't come across too many, but, like,
I mean, we have something going on next year anyway, so we'll see.
Yeah. We'll see. Yeah. And also just, like, I've got a bunch of one-shots and stuff, and I know, like, I mean, one-shots are not a really good representation, but still.
But, I mean, they dip your toes in there. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and honestly, I honestly, if we go through a lot of the module campaigns, and, like, I think it would, if you would be cool with it, I think it'd be okay if we do, like, long-standing module campaigns. I think something like this format would be fun again. Kind of talk about like the villains and kind of give an input.
Yeah,
If you want to
I
do
had
something.
a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun doing this actually, and I mean, it seems that based off what I've seen in chat, a lot of people like enjoyed it and they were like interacting and stuff with it. So I'm down to like do this again with more villains and stuff.
Yeah, no, we'll get more campaigns under the belt. We'll get some more villains. Get your input. Like obviously, not every villain is going to be humanoid,
Hmm.
but I think an input of like what you would surmise if we get a villain that isn't exactly human, like more
Hmm.
monstrous or something like that. If we could probably do like a what if they were more human, like kind of talk
Hmm.
about what kind of shit that you would diagnose them with, or like be like this is what traits they might have. Like that could also be an
Yeah.
angle.
Yeah, that would be fine because I think by the time we do get to that point, I'll be like an actual therapist.
I mean,
So
you're close enough. You're close
I'm
enough.
close enough. Yeah, I'm close enough. But it will be like a different kind of. I think it'll be interesting to kind of just see the growth, like, just see how this compares to like. I think it'd be also fun if we did a comparison between like say between like the two villains and stuff. I think that would be a fun little sit down thing to do as well.
Yeah, and even if we don't do villains, we could also do like either NPCs or like notable
Oh my
people.
god, I would love to do an analyst of Van Richten, I'm not gonna lie. Not gonna lie, I think that
so
would be fun.
so what I'm getting is have more campaigns that have Van Richten involved in them.
That's not what I'm saying.
That's what I got from that.
No,
But
I'm just saying I'd love to do a sit down and like do this, like analyze him like we did with Strahd, because he's an interesting person.
oh yeah, Van Richten is a very interesting person. He's got a
Hmm.
lot more story, and I know we kind of beat around the bush on like what his story is, but it would be interesting to
Hmm.
have your Cause see, like we could do this entire series alone on like the like the dreadlords of Ravenloft and everything that they
Hmm.
stand for and whatnot. Cause like there's plenty of them, as well as
Yeah.
just like yeah. But I feel like something like this makes more fun to like actually
Hmm.
play through a campaign with them. That way you can interact with them in character and have like a medium to kind of poke and
Hmm.
prod.
Hmm.
Because I mean, we can stare at the text all we want and be like, well, it says in this chat, but it's not as
Yeah.
fun if you don't get the opportunity to truly interact with them.
Hmm.
But I do not have anything else unless there's anything else you have for me in this regard.
Venus.
So nothing. All right.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, basically.
yeah, no, thank you again for kind of humoring this. I know we kind of were just like, ooh, what if we do this? Tee hee, and then we ended up doing it.
Yeah.
So I think we're gonna go raid out to Eve because
Yes, I
Eve,
thought Eva's live and Eva's friend.
yeah, they're doing little artsy things and probably a lot lighter tone about
Mm-hmm.
uh so we'll go say hi to her. Thank you
Mm-hmm.
again for joining in on this and just vibing and talking about D&D and shit. So
Yeah, of course.
yeah, we'll do this again eventually. As for any other streams, I'm just gonna keep. I'll probably stream more Void Train or whatever whenever I feel like it. And the next time we do a D&D stream won't be until next year. But
Mm-hmm.